Well, hey, Connexus, it's Carey Nieuwhof here with a special bonus episode in our Didn't See It Coming series. In this episode, I'm going to talk to Tony Morgan. Well, actually, he's going to talk to me. Tony is a friend of mine and a friend of ours at Connexus. He is the founder and CEO of the Unstuck Group, and he asked me to come on his podcast and talk about cynicism. And I really enjoyed the conversation. In fact, I worked really hard to get out of being interviewed and started interviewing him. You'll hear that part at the end. But we thought it might really help dig down a little bit further into the issue of cynicism, which so many of you identified with. We had an incredible part one to Didn't See It Coming at Connexus, all-time record attendance outside of Christmas and Easter. Over 1,900 people, like almost 2,000 of you, came out to attend one of our locations. We gave out a ton of Didn't See It Coming books for free. And, we're back with part two very, very soon if you're listening to this in real time. And, of course, if you're listening after the fact, well, you can dig into all the bonus content and all the messages in this series. But in the meantime, we had such a big response to the issue of cynicism, we thought we'd drill a little bit deeper. And I so appreciate it. I had lots of personal conversations with people. And I think the biggest surprise for me was how many women either emailed or came up and said, you know what, I'm really cynical. And I saw that today, referring to the message that's part one of this series. And you know what, to be honest, that really surprised me because I guess in my head, I never thought about it out loud. I thought, no, cynicism's a male issue. Well, guess not, right? This seems to impact a lot of us. So if you want to drill down and deal with your cynicism, hopefully this helps you get a little bit deeper into the issues. And I wanted to bring you this one because at the end, Tony and I talk about the reward for cynicism. Like if you hang on to something, there's clearly a reward there for you. And what is that? So hopefully this conversation helps you. Remember to listen to all 5 messages in the series as they become available. And we've got a bunch of bonuses with Didn't See It Coming. So here is Tony Morgan in conversation with me about cynicism.
All right, Carey. So I'm super excited. By the way, thanks for letting me preview the book. The new book is called Didn't See It Coming. And give us a quick overview of the topics, the challenges. And in fact, you allude to the fact that every one of us at some point in our lives are going to face these 7 challenges. So could you give us an overview of the challenges you hit in the book?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think I'm 7 for 7. So that's not bad, for an achiever. Not all at the same depth, but yeah, sure. So the book opens with cynicism, which you want to do a deep dive on, right. And in no particular order. One of them, which we see in the headlines a lot, but I think shows up in our life in a different way, is just what I call compromise. It's moral compromise. And yeah, there's the big stuff, the stuff that gets you out of leadership or fired or in jail. But I don't think that's where it engages most of us most days. It's the little compromises, just the little things that often will lead to the big things that many of us avoid, but that still doesn't mean it isn't a problem. Disconnection. Just big disconnection. A lot of leaders we know are isolated. I'm not sure tech has helped us with that. And then irrelevance, which was the one I wasn't sure whether I was going to put into the book. The editors kept telling me to keep it in. And
I was going to ask you that question. So that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And actually, in the few people who have read the book, there have been a number of people who've really resonated with that. Yeah. But it's less personal. It's more about your skill set, less about who you are. So I thought it was like Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other, but I got convinced to leave it in. And then pride, which is a big one. And rather than focus on narcissism, which apparently is an issue, I had a long conversation with Ern McManus about that very recently. I think most of us come to pride via insecurity. And then burnout. I'm rather famous for burning out well. And then finally, emptiness, which is maybe my favorite. I think it's I'm the only person who's read the book who thinks that's the best one. But this idea that you come, all your dreams come true and somehow you're empty. Like you're grateful, but like, what is that? So those are the 7 issues in the book.
Yeah, so we're going to make everybody read about the other 6, but today I'm looking at this as like free pastoral counseling. Okay, so
all right.
When I read through the book, There's definitely, and several of them that you just mentioned. I've had my bout with burnout, and certainly any of us in leadership, pride, narcissism, wherever you want to take that. But what hit me in the face was the section on cynicism. I think, I know, and anybody around me would tell you, of all of those 7, it's definitely the cynic in Tony Morgan that tends to come out. So let's start with help me diagnose if I thought I might be a cynic, Carey. What would be some of the warning signs that I would want to pay attention to?
I think there's at least a few for me. The big one would be projecting past failures onto the future. So what happens to a lot of us is, most of us start out as optimists. If you think back to even your toddler years, sky's the limit. Yeah, and unfortunately,
I don't know if I did. I think I came out. You did. Womb thinking negative thoughts. I don't know.
You were the cynical 3-year-old,
yes,
right?
I think I was.
It's like, I know what kind of sister you're going to be, right? It's like, yeah, totally, Tony. And so I think back to me, I was very idealistic in my late teens and 20s. You're going to change the world, and come on, church planters, they're all idealists. You're going to have the best church in the world. It's going to grow instantly. Entrepreneurs, similarly. Really, we leaders, and I think you've said this, or maybe I stole it from you. I don't know. I've written it too, but us leaders are dealers in hope. And I think that's what we do. If you're a preacher of the gospel, you deal in hope. And I think if you're a senior leader in an organization or a leader of anybody, you're bringing hope to people, right? Whether you're trying to have a better quarter, or whether you're trying to reach your city, or whether you're trying to baptize 100 people, 1,000 people, you're a dealer in hope. And what cynicism does is it snuffs out hope. And how it happens, and this is interesting, when you told me that this is where we're going in this interview, Tony, I would think you would be a prime candidate for cynicism. And here's your problem. So we'll talk about projecting past failures onto the future, but I think cynicism roots itself in knowledge. And you know this about our story. You've been on my podcast a few times. I've been on yours. I've been following you from before we knew each other personally. And one of the reasons I followed you is I think you have incredible insight. You see things that other people miss. And the problem with that, cynicism doesn't start because you don't know. It starts because you know, and you start to see the trends. And, so when you're planning a church, one of your greatest benefits is ignorance, right? It's like, well, I don't know how to plant a church. I don't know how to start a company. So you go for it. And then you fall flat on your face. You learn a whole bunch of stuff, or maybe it goes well, but you're still learning as you go along. And what happens is you accumulate knowledge. And then eventually that knowledge, that can either work for you or that can work against you. And what happened to me in my first decade of church leadership, and I launched into, I did 10 years of university. So, pray for me. I couldn't figure that out. I did history and then law and then theology. So anyway, at 31, I get launched into leadership. And by the time I hit 40, I felt like my heart had died. Yeah. And the problem, Tony, is, as you know from church world, is all these people you thought were going to be with you to the very end weren't, or at least not all of them were. And so all of a sudden you learn all these things about people, you learn about human nature. And then what I started to do, and this was a fatal mistake, and I tell the story in the book of Roger and Mary, just a couple that I had poured my heart into, who ended up leaving the church. And the reason they ended up leaving the church is they said, you didn't do enough and you didn't care enough. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I had literally did not in those first 5 years spend more time with anyone else in the church or pour more into anyone else. And they left saying I didn't do enough and we didn't do enough. And, the next time someone who reminded me, I think psychologists call this projection, reminded me of Roger and Mary when they walked into the back of the church, and they were kind of poor and maybe on the edges of society, which is exactly who we should be reaching in the church. You know what I thought? Oh, I know how this ends. Mm-hmm. I know where this goes. So I am not going to engage my heart at the level that I did because I don't want to get hurt. So whether in life, you've been through 10 bad relationships that all ended and you're like, I know what all men, what all women are like. Or, a lot of people are done with church. I mean, how many people in our generation are done with church? It's like, you know what? I tried 5. They're all terrible. And I know what pastors are really like. And all of a sudden you take those past failures and you project them on the future. And I think that's the death sentence.
Yeah. It's ironic that you allude to the story that you just shared, because Emily and I, my wife and I, were just walking through our neighborhood yesterday, exercise, trying to pray for our new neighbors in our new neighborhood. And we were talking about one specific person in our lives. And I said it like this. I see the steps that this person's taking. They're heading down the wrong path. I know how this story ends. And Emily, of course, who doesn't struggle with cynicism, very optimistic, believes the best in people, which is exactly why I married the right woman, said, actually, I don't think that's the way it's going to end, Tony. So I need the Emilys in my life. But the way I've expressed it to some people, Carey, is I find that, God puts certain strengths in each of us as we become believers. I think you're right. I think for me, knowledge, discernment, that's part of the gifting, the wiring that God put into me. The great thing is when God's in control of that wiring and gifting, he can work through me to really impact people's lives. When I take back control of that gifting, that's when I find I get myself into trouble, and that knowledge and discernment shifts to cynicism. So I think you're spot on. But in the book, then you start to talk about the antidote for cynicism. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I will. Can I jump on something you just said? Because I think it's a really important distinction, Tony. Like, there is a fine line between a gifting and, why were we so happy when we were young, or some of us anyway? Because we were stupid, right? Like, I didn't know everything that could go wrong. Yeah. I had no idea. And actually, that's an advantage. The lack of knowledge that a founder or a starter has is actually, it's shown in entrepreneurial and church planting circles. That's one of the greatest gifts. Like, if you knew everything that could go wrong in whatever you're starting, whatever you're launching, whatever you're attempting, you probably wouldn't do it, because you'd just be too afraid and you'd be like, oh, I see how this ends. So I think there is a beauty in naivete that is really good. But what you say is you have a gifting. So you have a gifting of insight. And I think a lot of leaders listening to your podcast would be similarly gifted. Yeah. And back to your walk with Emily yesterday, sometimes you actually do know how this ends. Like, sometimes you can be pretty accurate. Like, I'm sure, Tony, you've been to our church a few times and helped us through the consulting that you do. And, we're sitting there in some big mystery, and you walk in, and within 3 minutes, you've got a pretty good read on what's really going on. I mean, isn't that true for you?
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, Carey.
It's a blessing and a curse, right? So it's a blessing, and I have a similar gift. I'm much better at diagnosing other people's problems than my own, which makes me a great consultant, by the way. But I can walk in and I can size up a church or a room, an organization pretty quickly, and it doesn't take a lot. And, I'll go in, meet with the senior leadership team, or, sit down with the team and have a conversation, and I've got it figured out fairly accurately, fairly quickly, which is a gift if it helps. It's a curse if it hurts. And what happens is, and this is the fine line that I wanted to get back to, is when I use, I guess you could say one is descriptive. Okay, Carey, let me show you what's going on at Connexus. Let me show you what's going on with your team. Does this resonate? But what I will do, what the cynic in me will do if I'm not careful, is I will make it prescriptive, and I will almost make that a death sentence. I will almost say, well, of course it has to end this way. And then when you snuff out hope, you don't seek to help. You're just like, okay, Carey, let me tell you, this is how you're going to die, right? And that's not helping anybody. Yeah. So I thought that was a really good point. And I think often the difference is, how can I use this knowledge to help? Or what a cynic would do is, a cynic would be, you're waiting until that moment where you can say, see, told you. Yeah. That's where cynics live.
Which I don't verbalize, I told you so, very often, but in my brain, I am.
There's an antidote.
There is an antidote, and you've kind of actually alluded to it a little bit already. you say curiosity is where we need to be related to cynicism. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I noticed something years ago that really fascinated me, Tony, and that is that cynics are never curious and the curious are never cynical. Like, rarely do those two line up. And I realized that the more I cultivated curiosity, the less cynical I became. I think there's something bigger underneath it, and that is that the ultimate antidote to cynicism is hope. And oh my goodness, I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, so many of the people listening are Christians. We have the best antidote to cynicism in the world. Like, Christians should be the least cynical. I mean, you're staring a tomb in the face and all of a sudden there's resurrection. You look at death and God gives you life. You look at sin and he gives you forgiveness. Like, nobody is better at hope than Jesus, and nothing is an antidote to cynicism like the gospel. Yet so many of us live in this cynical space where we don't even believe what we preach. We are, not smoking what we're selling, to use a really bad metaphor. that has no personal resonance with me. But anyway, it's like, are you kidding me? But saying that hope is the antidote to cynicism is a little bit like saying Jesus is the answer to everything, which he ultimately is, but it's a bit trivial. So, okay, how do I put legs on that? The legs for me have been, a curious person is always more hopeful, always more forward thinking. I remember watching PBS one day. I don't know, I was just flipping channels, and for some reason, I don't even remember what it was about. There was this 80-year-old professor, and he was a prof, like, tweed jacket, bow tie, spectacles, not glasses. Like, he truly had like academic spectacles on. And I'm thinking, wow, what is this guy? Like, he's some expert, world expert in something. And I'm listening to him talk just for a minute. And he's like, well, what we're discovering these days in the current research is, and I'm like, dude, you're 80 years old. Like, when are you going to rest on your laurels? And very recently, actually, much more recently, I am a Tim Ferriss Show podcast listener. Mm-hmm. He interviewed George Raveling, who's this 80-year-old African-American coach who talked about being 80 a lot. But what blew me away was he is so curious. He's so open. He's joining masterminds. He's reading multiple books a week. He is giving gifts to people. And he's like, man, my best years are ahead of me. And I'm like, I want to be him when I'm 80.
Yeah.
And I think if you embrace curiosity and that posture of openness and learning and being willing to trust again, hope again, believe again, I hope that the 70-year-old Carey is a lot more alive and optimistic and wide-eyed than the 53-year-old Carey that's talking to you right now.
That's good. And it actually reminds me of a story that I've shared quite often about my early days. Emily and I were just married. We didn't have any kids. We went to the donut shop. It felt like almost every Saturday. This is when we thought donuts used to be good for us, I guess. I don't know that they were healthy in some way, but
they still were.
Yeah. Anyways, we were often at the donut shop, and in one corner of the donut shop, there was this group of older men that would gather around this circular table, and they were enjoying their coffee and their donuts, but they would also always be talking about problems, challenges. And what was amazing about that table is they had the answer to everything. And Emily and I began to refer to that table as the table of all knowledge. And what I've shared with other folks is my fear is I have opinions. I'm not afraid to share my opinions. The cynicism runs deep in me. And my fear is if I don't embrace curiosity, like you have suggested, that one day I too will be at the table of all knowledge. And it's not going to be a fun place. I mean, in the moment, it might be fun, but in the end, I'm not going to be a happy person. And the impact of the gifting that God has put into me won't be fulfilled. So I think pursuit of curiosity is something we all need to lean into, especially those of us in leadership.
That's a great story. Can I ask you a question?
You bet.
And thank you for being so honest, but this is like in keeping with your...
Well, again, I'm just looking at... This is like free counseling, Carey, so I'm just thinking I'm going to take advantage of every bit of this.
I'm just curious, what is the reward for you in cynicism? Like if we cling to a behavior, there is something, whether that's a chemical sequence in the brain that makes us feel good, whether it is safety and security. What would you say when you look back on it?
Yeah.
What's the reward?
So again, the root, I think it's knowledge, like you suggested, and where other attributes, strengths in leaders, people, maybe a little bit different than that for me, we all want to win. And so when I can look back at something and say, I saw that coming and it actually happened, then I think that's the reward for me. Yeah. And so I think everything that you're talking about is spot on. And so, and you're right. It's those instances when I've backed away from those initial insights and looked for confirmation by asking questions, by getting different perspectives. And in some instances, it really did confirm that initial insight. And then, as you suggested, rather than using that knowledge to hurt, we're using that knowledge to take a step forward, which is everything that the Unstuck Group is about when we're engaging with churches. In those instances, I'm seeing what could still be described as a bit of cynicism working for good, I guess. But when I let myself get to that place of using this just to say I told you so, or not really leaning into the opportunity to help someone take a next step in whatever the situation is, that's where I see not only is that detrimental to the people around me, but at the end of the day, it's also impacting me and my relationship with Jesus too. So, yeah.
Interesting. No, I think you're right. And that really resonates with me. I didn't put this in the book. Maybe cynicism could be a whole book. I don't know. But that seems to be the chapter that everybody's resonating with.
Really?
I mean, there are others as well, but it is the big, and it's chapter 1 of the book, 1 and 2. But I
did read the rest of the book though.
Yeah. But just read the first chapter. It's great. Yeah. So, for me, I think, and I'm really analyzing that. I wonder if the reward, because I hadn't thought about that. I'm like, okay, what's the reward for cynicism? Because there's always a reward, right? And I think for me, it is that chance to say, gotcha, I was right. Look at me. It's a bit of superiority. Yeah. And I wonder if for me, when I stay cynical, and because cynicism is a choice, if I choose cynicism in that moment, I wonder if part of that is it insulates me from really engaging the problem. So if I just walk into a church as one of your consultants, let's say, which I'm not, you have your own team, but I walk in and I'm like, oh yeah, it's bad. And here's 5 ways it's bad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I just kind of pronounce a death sentence on that place, I can wash my hands and walk away. But that insulates me from the problem. If I'm to stay hopeful, if I'm to beat my curiosity, that means, okay, we're going to do a deep dive into this together. Yeah. And you think about that relationally. If you get cynical about your kids or your marriage or a good friend and you're like, oh, you rolling your eyes like this guy's always that way. Well, the opposite of cynicism is no, you got to hope again. You got to trust again. You got to believe again. You got to put your heart in your hand, take it out of its little tomb and put your heart out there and engage with that person or engage with that problem and really trust God to bring about a better solution. And so I've tried to live that way over the last decade since I sort of, burned out and came back and tried to figure that out. And it's a harder way to live, but it's a better way to live.
That's good, Carey. All right. So any final encouragement to the leaders that are listening in, whether it's around this topic of cynicism or any of the other 6 topics, any other final encouragement for the leaders that are listening?
Yeah, I just hope this book feels like hope. You don't, once a cynic, you don't always have to be a cynic. I'm hopefully some tiny evidence of that, I'm way more hopeful and optimistic than I was 15 years ago. And, ironically, it was ministry that turned me into a cynic, not law, which is just the strangest thing. I wasn't in law very long too, so maybe that had something to do with it. And then there's just hope. Like, I think you can see these big pitfalls coming. And there's little diagnostic tools in the book, and then there's antidotes in every chapter about, well, how do you stay relevant? How do you avoid compromise? Work twice as hard on on your character as you do on your competency. Emptiness, there's an antidote for that. And so I'm really hoping that, this is the personal journey of leadership that I think takes so many of us out. And if it doesn't take us out, it caps our growth. So we never become the person, the husband, the father, the leader, the contributor that God sees in us. That never gets realized. So I hope this kind of, takes the lid off of our leadership, because so much of it is that internal battle. And I just want people to know that there's hope.
Very good. Thank you, Carey, for today's conversation and for the free counseling. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Tony. It's always a blast. Yeah, so that whole part about reward was really interesting to me, because I didn't include that in the book. And as I was thinking through it with Tony, I thought, there's got to be a reward. And you know what? I realized that when I fell into that cynical period, it was protecting me from people, when I really think what God wants me to do is to wade into the middle with people and really keep my heart open and engaged. So hopefully this is helping you hope again, trust again, and believe again. We're going to pick up with part 2 this weekend at Connexus Church. If you're listening to these episodes in real time, make sure you don't miss it. Bring a friend. Books will be available if you missed out last weekend. Last weekend was the freebie weekend, but they will be available at a reduced rate. And you know what? That's good news, because just about everybody is out of stock. The retailers are. Amazon just went out of stock. So that's a place to get. Didn't see it coming this weekend at Connexus Church. And I can't wait to bring you part 2. We are going to be talking about disconnectedness. And why is it that in the biggest technological revolution in history, where we are connected to more people than ever before, we all feel so alone? That's what we're tackling in part 2 of this series this weekend. And if you want to learn more, or where Connexus is, maybe a friend forwarded this episode to you, you can learn everything at connexuschurch.com. That's CONNEXUS, connexuschurch.com. We would love to have you join us. If you don't live in Central Ontario, you can also watch live online or on demand at connexuschurch.com as well. So part 2 this weekend. We will see you then. Bring a friend, and can't wait.